So welcome everyone. Welcome to part 5 of the Awaken series. And the topic is an interesting one today. Redefining your relationship with anger. As usual, there are a lot of aha moments for me while chatting with JadeFire about this and as he was guiding me. First of all, he began with the purpose for this topic. And he wants that to be conveyed to you very, very clearly. And so I'm going to read out the words so that there is no misinterpretation. The first purpose of today's meeting is to integrate anger into our very consciousness, to integrate anger into our lives. Of course, that itself kind of instantly made me go, why, what, when? And all he said is, wait, all shall be explained. But it's important that we remember this first purpose: integrate anger into our consciousness, integrate anger into our lives. The second purpose: to use anger as our fuel for our creative mind. To allow our creative mind to be fueled by anger. I can almost see some raised eyebrows and wondering, what does this mean? How do I use anger to fuel my creative mind? And please understand, that was exactly my reaction. And the third purpose: to help us to understand that anger can be used as a sacred fuel for our personal evolution and global evolution. So from these three purposes, you can understand how very, very important this lesson is, how important part 5 is. And yes, I agree with someone who was telling me the other day that every week, she said, every week I feel as though this week was the best. Yes, that's exactly what I feel. Each week, I am eager to know what will come through. So when we speak of these three purposes, the first thing that JadeFire says is our very concept of spirituality comes in our way. Everything that we've believed in, everything that we've believed is spiritual, comes in the way and in fact stops us from using anger to fuel our creative mind, to fuel our evolution, personal and global. And we refuse to allow anger to be an integral part of our consciousness, to be an integral part of our life. And he says that's the first change you have to make if you want to redefine your relationship with anger. You have to understand that when you pursue the path of love and understanding and oneness, it doesn't mean that anger does not play a part in your life. He was very, very, very clear in stating repeatedly that anger is a core energy and you shall never be free of it. It is part of the human structure. And it is a very vital part of the human structure. So when we erroneously believe that because I am following a spiritual path, because I wish to enhance my consciousness, because I wish to help myself and others move along on the path of evolution, I should therefore not get angry. This itself becomes our greatest hurdle. And when I spoke to him about anger, and I said, how does anger help me to evolve if I am shouting at someone, if I am screaming at someone, or if I am hitting someone, if I am abusing someone? How does it help me to evolve? And he said, you are speaking of the lowest layer of anger. You are speaking of the layer of violence. You are speaking of the layer of hatred. You are speaking of the layer of abuse. And yes, it is one facet of anger, but because your minds are so focused and so taken up by this one layer, which is the lowest layer of anger, you have not been able to therefore focus your attention upon anger as an extremely sacred energy. Just as I was explained that just as we have been imbued with so much sacred divine energy, one of these energies that is part and parcel of our human embodiment is anger. And yes, as he says, if you and I wish to use that sacred energy in its destructive form, if we wish to live our lives by focusing upon the lowest layer of anger, that is our free will choice. But he says today's talk is to help you to revisit this sacred energy and help you to climb higher, to leave behind the lower rung, to leave behind this lowest layer, and to actually turn your attention on the higher layers of anger. And when we do that, that is when anger becomes truly the fuel of the creative mind and for evolution. In fact, he says, when you repress or when you suppress your anger, you are doing great harm to yourself. Now, please understand, friends, the difference between repression and suppression. Repression is when you are not even aware that you are pushing down your anger. You have been so strongly indoctrinated. You have been so strongly conditioned to be the good boy, the good girl, the good person, the spiritual person, that you're not even aware that your reaction is one of anger, and you push it down and mask. You wear this mask that is, I am not angry. Suppression is a very conscious attempt. where you might have started learning about spirituality. You might have read books that, talk about love and unity and harmony and oneness, and that everyone is God's self. And then every time you are angry, you very consciously try to control this anger. Whether it is the subconscious, unconscious repression or the very conscious suppression, JadeFire says both cause untold harm to you. And he said this series is not only about personal growth, it's really about global, universal growth, universal evolution. And this untold harm that repression and suppression causes also spills over in a very significant way and stands as a huge hurdle in the path of universal evolution. Because on the one hand, we are attempting, through our meditations, through our endeavors, we are attempting to involve, include, embrace everyone into our heart circle. We are trying very hard to move away from the separation mindset. We are fervently trying to look at each embodiment as a God self. But none of this is really working as quickly or as effectively as it could because of the repressed and suppressed anger. He says there is another danger of repressing or suppressing your anger, and that is, in fact, he says that is exactly what is happening in the world today. When you repress or suppress your anger, you are very easily manipulated by others. You become completely vulnerable to manipulation. For me, this was a huge aha moment. And I asked JadeFire to explain this to me more clearly. So he said, when you have a deep need to be loved, when you have a deep need to be liked, to be approved of, when you have a deep need to belong, when you have a need to be embraced and nurtured, you will do everything in your power to get that. You will do everything in your power to get the love, to get the nurturing, to get the acknowledgement, to get the recognition. And one of the things JadeFire says that you do very, very, very often as a human race is you suppress your anger. You refuse to give your anger expression. And he keeps repeating that, please note, I am not referring to the lowest level of anger. He says that lowest level of anger is present only in the egoic mind. The creative mind does not hold that lowest level of anger. The lowest level of anger is present only in the egoic mind, and JadeFire is not referring to that at all. So we repress this anger because we want to be loved, we want to be approved, we want to be admired, we want to be appreciated. We want people to think well of us. And then what happens? That makes us vulnerable to someone else's manipulation, because either directly spoken or without words, in a non-verbal manner, that person, the opposite person or persons, shall definitely convey to us that if you are angry, then I am going to stop loving you, I am going to stop caring for you, I am going to stop recognizing you, you are not part of my circle. And in order not to lose that, we allow the manipulation to take place. Of course, we do not know that we are being manipulated. And of course, that person is not deliberately manipulating us. But this manipulative interaction, JadeFire says, exists in all your relationships on earth. Whether you are an employee or an employer, whether you are husband, wife, mother, father, child, whether you are teacher, whether you're student, whether you're a friend, whether you're an enemy. In all our relationships, manipulation has become, unfortunately, a constant. And in very subtle ways, we give very, very strong and clear messages that our love is conditional, that our love, our friendship, our relationships, our kindness, our compassion is based upon one fact. You are not allowed to be angry with me. You are not allowed to express your anger. Because if you do, I'm going to shut you out. And he says it is time that the world recognizes this manipulation that we all indulge in and that we are all vulnerable to. And so the first step of redefining our relationship with anger is not to give yourself the permission to express your anger, but to give the other the permission to express their anger. That, he says, is step number one. To give the other full permission to express their anger towards you without your love, without your recognition, without your acknowledgement, being conditional. Step two, and this was quite interesting to me because I thought step two would be step one, but he says no. Step two is when you allow yourself to express your anger. You must allow others to express their anger first. You must move into a space of true compassion and true love, unconditional love. And only when you can do that for someone else, you'll actually be able to do that for yourself, because doing it for yourself, JadeFire says, is far more difficult than doing it for someone else. And sitting back and thinking of this after our chat was over, I said, yes, I do believe it would be easy, far easier for me to give you the space and to hold space for you to express your anger than it would be for me to hold space for myself. Because even though over the years I have learned so significantly to express my anger in an absolutely non-violent way, in ways that I didn't even know existed 15 years ago, but which I follow instinctively now. But still, in spite of that movement, in spite of that progress, I do believe I would find it easier to hold space for you and then to hold space for me. And so that is step one and step two. What JadeFire goes on to say is, when we are seeking this love that is so conditional in our human world, when we are seeking this love from the outside, when we are manipulating others and being manipulated simultaneously, the separation between us grows. There is a far greater divide. And we remain as I and you. And when there is this separation, we have already seen in earlier parts, the separation only comes from a very, very strong scarcity mindset. Step 3, JadeFire says, use your anger to fight for your goals, to fight for your dreams, to fight for your desires, to fight for your aspirations. Whatever may be your dream, your desire, your aspiration, do not allow someone else to tell you that it is right or wrong. Because as soon as you want someone to tell you that it's right, or someone who's telling you that it's wrong, in both cases, you're being manipulated. When you don't feel the need to be validated, you cannot be manipulated. And JadeFire says the sacred energy of anger has to be channeled in that direction. And I asked him then, that do you mean it has to be channeled as activism? It has to be channeled as, you know, coming out and strongly marching the streets and all of that? And he says that may be someone's chosen path. And JadeFire says we have no issues with that chosen path if that chosen path is not coming from the lowest layer of violence and abuse. If that chosen path is not coming from the egoic mind, then so be it. Then for that person, activism is their chosen path, and we give all our blessings to them. But he says there are many who do not choose activism. For them, it is a more silent path. They, for whatever reason, wish to remain what appears to be in the background, but in fact can fortify the same fight, can empower those same goals, can walk on the same path of fulfillment of those goals by using means that are non-activist. So it could be spiritual means, it could be writing about it, it could be talking to people about things, it could be helping adults and children change their point of views. It could be a whole array of different paths that each of us can follow. But all of these paths have to come from the creative mind and not the egoic mind. And therefore, that is step 3. To use all the force of this anger to fight for our goals. And he says, do not use this anger to fight against people. Use it to fight for your dreams. Use it to fight for your ideas. Use it to fight for your ideals, not to fight against people. When you fight against people, this sacred energy, instead of empowering you, is disempowering you. Because when I fight against you, what I am immediately doing is I am giving you my personal power. So instead of the anger being used to fuel me, to fuel my personal power, my anger is in fact making me feel drained. My anger makes me feel worse. My anger makes me feel scared. My anger makes me feel alienated. And haven't we all felt this when we have been angry? Right? When there is an outburst of anger, it leaves us spent. It leaves us exhausted. It leaves us drained of all energy. And JadeFire says, can you understand this now? Can you understand why you feel drained? Because what you have done is used the lowest layer of anger. You have reacted from your egoic mind, and you have given away your power. So instead of vitality, which anger gives to us, what we feel is complete and utter exhaustion, mental, physical, and emotional draining. In order to ensure that our relationship with anger changes, we have to stop wanting to be violent. Now, this was another aha moment for me. And I said, I really don't think that a large number of us, at least those who are going to hear this Awaken series, I said, JF, I genuinely don't believe that any one of them wants, or me, wants to be violent. And he said, let me stop you right there. If you don't want to be violent, then why are you? I didn't have an answer. Why would your reactions be violent? He says there is no human being who is so weak that they do what they don't want to do. There may be extenuating circumstances, yes. There may be external pressures, yes. But in the final analysis, JadeFire says, if you are violent in your reaction, it is because you want to be violent. You are so used to functioning from that lowest layer. You are so used to functioning from the egoic mind that your first response is violence. And he says, do not misunderstand. Violence does not need your hands to move. Violence does not need weapons. Violence does not need bombs. Violence only needs your energy intent. And when you think of someone with that anger that comes from the egoic mind, JF says, you are resorting to violence. And he goes on to ask, how will you stop violence if you resort to it without even being aware that you are resorting to it? So the next step is to want to stop being violent, to stop this feeling that someone else is right or wrong. And this is something that JadeFire said, which really opened my eyes. And he said, last week we spoke about justice and punishment. It is your anger. It is your poor relationship with your anger. It is your go-to reaction that comes from violence that makes you believe. And friends, I would like you to hear this, because for me it was like, repeat that again, I want to hear it. It makes you believe that it is good to be bestial, it is good to be harsh, it is good to be cruel, it is good to be abusive, it is good to be violent with someone who is bad. And he says, your entire justice system is based upon this one premise. It is good to be violent, to be harsh with someone who is bad. And he says, still you change this mindset. Anger will always enslave you. And an anger that enslaves you always comes from the egoic mind and not from the creative mind. So when we choose violence, we often do it, no, not often, in fact, we almost always do it in order to protect. It may be to protect ourselves, it may be to protect our families, it may be to protect our religion, it may be to protect our country, it may be to protect our values, it may be to protect our possessions. But out of this need to protect comes the violence, comes the anger from the lower level. At this point, JadeFire said, I'm going to stop speaking for a few moments. And I'm going to ask you to take a few moments to think of all the bad people in your life. And he says, I'm not only talking of ones who are criminals or the ones you judge as bad. I'm talking about anyone with whom you have been angry, who you believe has hurt you, who you believe have betrayed you, who have lied to you, who have put you down. Think of all the bad people in your life and then think of all the bad people in the world. And I smiled here because over the years, over the many years, JF has constantly reiterated there is no good and there is no bad. And here was JF telling me, think of all the bad people. And so I'm going to ask you to do the same. I'm going to ask you to just maybe close your eyes if you wish to, but take a few minutes, take a few moments rather, and really reiterate for yourself. You know, start with family. Families are always our reactive agents. And then, you know, spread this circle outwards and then go to the world at large and really think of all the bad people. I'm sure in these few moments you've made a very long list, as I had. And JF said, now I'm asking you 2 questions. And I'm going to ask these 2 questions to you. Is this anger about them? Is this anger about you? And I was very honest. I said, I know that the answer you want is that it is about me. And I know somewhere that that is the right answer. But I'm also being honest, I don't want it to be about me. I want the answer to be that this anger is about them. I want the anger to be that it's about their actions, it's about their words, it's about their values, it's about their beliefs. And he stopped me and he said, do you think you should hear the Awaken series part 2 all over again, where we spoke about separation? And he said, beloved, do you think you should hear the Awaken series part 2 all over again. Because if you cannot honestly answer that it is about you, then you must go back to the Awaken series part 2 and hear it again and again and again and again. And so I'm urging you to do the same. Do not answer what you know is the right answer to give. Be as authentic as I was with JadeFire. Really, according to you, is this anger about them or about you? And this is a huge question to answer, because in this lies the crux of our relationship with anger. We believe that we are justified because the other does not have my values, because the other has acted in a manner that I believe is wrong, because the other has belief systems that completely are alien to me. But you see, in all of this, I keep saying the other. It is only when I am able to not only just see intellectually, not only just see from some spiritual abstraction, that this other is me, unless and until I can believe that, unless and until I can know that, I shall continue to make this list very, very long. And this list will always be about them. Because from that mindset of separation, there will always be a them. There will always be another. And when I need to protect myself, my ideals, my religion, my community, my family, my nation, when I need to protect myself from the other, when I need to protect myself from them, then I am unable to A, share of myself, and B, JadeFire says, you have come into this world, you have been part of the human race for many, many incarnations for one reason alone. You have come to learn from differences. If the human race was founded upon unity, then JadeFire says, you would have learned from each other's similarities. But you have come into a human race, into a world that is based upon differences, where differences are the most vital part of your evolutionary journey. And you can proceed on this evolutionary journey when you learn from differences, and when you can constantly continue to speak of them and the other, then we don't learn from these differences. And we don't learn to share ourselves. What do I mean by that? I don't mean sharing my wealth or sharing my possessions. That is so easy to do. And this is my belief. This is not a talk I had with JadeFire. This is me. It is so easy to share what I have, what I own, what I possess. It is so challenging to share myself. It is easy to share myself with my loved ones. It is easy to share myself with my family, with my friends, with all those who think like I do, who live as I do, who hold up the same ideals that I do. But it is so challenging to share myself with those who I believe are bad. And the exercise that he has put us on of including in your heart circle, and so many of us are doing this, including in your heart circle all those who you have judged as bad. That is the first step towards sharing yourself with others. When you share yourself with others, when you open yourself to these others, you begin to move in the direction of learning from differences, and learning from differences that in fact all of us are exactly the same. Because that terrorist uses the bomb and the gun as his mode of violence, and we use our words and our thoughts. And JadeFire says, why is it considered right for you to use your words and thoughts of violence, but it is considered wrong for someone else to use the gun and the bomb? On what are you basing this justification? In fact, he says, is there any justification? Then JadeFire went on to say something that absolutely shocked me. I mean, these were the last words I ever expected to hear from JadeFire. And he said, love can achieve nothing. And I went back and I said, what? What was that? And he repeated, love can achieve nothing by itself. So I said, oh, love can achieve nothing by itself. So what has to be added to love to achieve something? And he said, would you believe it? That the answer is anger. Anger as the sacred energy has to be added to love in order for creation to take place. Now you tell me if this is not putting everything that we know entirely upon its head. And I smiled and I said, JadeFire, are you having these series only to make us do these mind somersaults every week? Because every week you are telling us something that is just incredible. And he said, think about it. Is it really as unimaginable as you believe it to be? Think about it. Turn the pages of your history books. You have many instances of love where love has made very, very big changes. But read a little further, read deeper, and you will find that the person or persons who have brought about these large changes, changes which the world at that time believed could never be done, there was another force that was propelling the love. And that force was that force of sacred fire of anger. And that's where he said, to redefine your relationship with anger, you have to anchor your anger in your solar plexus and anchor the anger in your heart. Anger has to be in both your chakras. Anger's rightful place is the solar plexus chakra. It is the energy of fire. It is the energy of vitality. It is the energy of your personal power. But when anger is not also anchored in your heart, then the solar plexus fire becomes a destructive force. That solar plexus fire erupts like a volcano from the egoic mind. But when anger is anchored in your heart as well, the love, the compassion, the unity, the harmony, the oneness is pushed forward by the fuel that anger provides. He says love is a force, but it does not have the ability to propel itself forward. Love is a force that expands itself. It cannot push itself forward. It grows. If it is here, it grows larger and larger and larger here, unless there is a propulsion behind it. And that propulsion is the sacred fire of anger. At this point, I stopped him and I said, I think, JadeFire, you need to define anger for me. Because every time I am hearing you say anger, I'm sorry, I know you've said that my belief of anger comes from the lowest layer, but I need you to define the higher layers for me. What do you mean? When you use the word anger, what are you referring to? I know you have said you are not referring to violence, you're not referring to abuse, you're not referring to rage. What are you referring to? And his answer blew me away. He says, I'm referring to the force of creation that refuses to allow things to remain stagnant. I am referring to progress. I am referring to advancement. I am referring to changes and transformations that are important not for one person, but for the world. The anger that comes from the creative mind does not think about self. It thinks about the world. And he says, this is the anger that I am referring to. And then he gave me an example, which he has given to me before, but he repeated it here. And he says, when a diamond comes out from the earth, if you would look at it, you would probably cast it aside and say, it's a clump of dirt. But those who have the vision will recognize that lying deep within this clump of dirt is something radiant and special. And what do they do with this clump of dirt? They expose it to the strongest possible fire that they can. It's fired, it's hot. He says that heat, which removes the dirt and brings the radiance, is what I am referring to as anger. And each one of you has that sacred fire within you. But what you do when you see a clump of dirt, you instantly take that clump of dirt and you push it into your egoic mind, and then you look at it and you judge it as bad, as dirty, as vile, and then you believe that it is good to therefore be harsh to this thing that is bad. And you then go many steps further and create an entire justice system on this belief. So, of course, I asked him, I said, this has taken everything that I have believed and thrown it out of the window. How do I use this sacred fire that is there within me? And he said, for the first few days, without doing anything else, write down that list that I asked you to make, the list of all the bad people, whether you know them, whether you don't know them, whether they are alive, they're not alive. Write down that list and hold your solar plexus so that you remind yourself that the fire remains there. That is where your fire is. Because at present, your anger is not anchored in your heart. Your anger is only anchored in your solar plexus. So hold your solar plexus. Look at each name. Breathe in. Breathe in the energy of that person. So that very, very clearly you are giving yourself this significant message that that person's energy is now mine, is within me. So breathe that energy deeply within, into your solar plexus where this anger burns. And then very strongly breathe it out. And he made me do this, so I'm going to do it here for you. And he says, do this with that person till you feel calm about this person. And move to the next. He says, if it is a body of people, if it is a community, if it is a nation, then put all of them together as a collective group and do the same exercise. But he says you've got to breathe out your anger. By doing that, you are taking responsibility of two things. You're taking responsibility of strongly acknowledging to yourself this energy that I have condemned as bad, as evil. This energy that I have called them, I have called the other. I now take it within me. I make it into my energy. It becomes me. And whatever is the rage that I have associated with this energy, I take the responsibility, and that's responsibility number 2. I take the responsibility of expelling that from my system forcefully. So, breathe it out. So there's an explosive sound as you breathe it out. And he said, once that it's done, once you have gone through that list, you then take one hand away from your solar plexus and you put that upon your heart. And then you meditate upon this anger as a creative force. So you meditate upon your ideas, upon your ideals, upon your goals, upon your purpose, upon the transformation that you seek. He was very clear. He says, do not let those go. In your journey of spirituality, neither justify your anger nor deny it. And do not let your ideals and beliefs and values and purpose disappear. Keep that very strongly in mind, because you have come into this world. You are listening to these Awaken series because you have a purpose to fulfill. So don't let that purpose be forgotten. But when you've anchored that anger into your heart, meditate upon the transformation that you seek, not only for yourself, for the world at large. Today we are living in a world of tremendous extremities, of tremendous polarization. It's such a strong me versus them. What is the transformation you seek in this world? Meditate upon that transformation and ask the love energy that is propelled by the sacred anger to give you the next step forward. One step at a time. He says your goals will be attained one step at a time. Do not ask for the entire road to be shown to you. Ask for one step to be shown to you. And then honor what you receive. Do what you have been told. And then when you've done it, repeat that meditation. And once again, ask the love energy propelled by the sacred energy of fire to say, what is my next step? And he says, when you have done this, you will have completely changed your relationship with anger. And he ends with a few lines which I would really like to read out to you, because I love them. Anger destroys you when it is ignored. Anger creates a new world when it is owned. Anger compels you to hate others when it enslaves you. Anger empowers you and makes you empower others when it is mastered. The challenge here is not to control your anger. The challenge here is to use the anger as the sacred fire that it really is. On my YouTube channel, there are already 2 meditations that I have channeled a while ago on anger. One is leaving behind your anger, and the other one is transforming anger consciousness into love consciousness. Even though I channeled those meditations, and especially the second one, transforming anger consciousness into love consciousness, it was only today that I truly understood what that meditation meant. Because the love that JadeFire speaks of is not the human love that is conditional. It is the force of love. And the anger that JadeFire speaks of is not the rage and violence and abuse. It is the sacred core energy that makes us vital, powerful, strong human beings. And JadeFire says, in these days, you are worshipping the goddess. When you see the goddess Durga, when you recognize the truth of the goddess Kali, it is then that you shall know what anger really is, what love really is. I pray that we shall all begin this journey of redefining our relationship with anger. Love you all. Thank you for being here.